Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Matt Show. And today we are joined by a very special guest, Jacquelyn McMiller, who is running for mayor in Fort Myers, Florida. Her campaign has been endorsed by both Andrew Yang and Humanity Forward, and we are very excited to have her on the show today. Jacquelyn, thank you for coming on. How are you today?
I am wonderful now that I'm on here with you and all of your followers and everyone that's watching your show, Matt. It's a pleasure.
That's what we like to hear. And another thing that we like to hear, Jacquelyn, and something that makes me really excited is that if elected as mayor of Fort Myers, Florida, you have pledged that you will join the Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, which is a group of mayors, for those who don't know, all across the country from Long Beach or Los Angeles, California, all the way to maybe Fort Myers, Florida, where they're just starting universal basic income pilots across the country. And Jacquelyn has pledged that she will join that. What made you decide that universal basic income was the direction that you wanted to go with that? Was it something that you've always been thinking about, or was it something that entered your mind more recently?
Well, actually, it was more recently with when Andrew actually ran for president. And I see this man on stage and he's mentioning this whole $1,000 a month and this universal basic income. And I'm thinking, it's either he's confused or there's something really to it. So I hopped up at that time, went to my tablet, and I started kind of researching it and reading a little bit about it. And I kind of thought, maybe he has a point. And especially with what some of the things that Fort Myers is facing right now with the COVID crisis, but also with the fact that we are about 17% of our workers here are at or below the poverty line. So there's a lot of things that this basic income could possibly do for this entire community. So I was really excited and I started reading a little bit more about it. And it was a little bit before I actually decided to run for mayor. But I thought this would be a wonderful idea to have here in Fort Myers.
That's awesome. It sounds like from that you had almost come around and been like a supporter of the idea before what we saw that nobody saw coming with the pandemic. That seems to have strengthened a lot of people's view in favor of the idea. Did you find it once the pandemic started that it just reinforced the idea that this was the policy that we needed to implement?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We're going to, unfortunately, many of our city leaders, and no one's thinking about what happens with this new normal that we have, and how are we going to jumpstart our economy as well. And if you have people that are not spending any money, the businesses are going to be severely affected. The economy overall is going to be severely affected. So we need to get that income back in so people can spend, feel comfortable spending, but also being able to pay their bills without the stress of worrying about how they're going to pay their bills.
Yeah. Rolling it back a little, what made you decide to get in? Like, is running for mayor your first venture into politics? And
It
if
is.
so, awesome. If so, well, not if so, it's if, or you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Why now and why mayor?
Well, I lived in Fort Myers my pretty much my entire life in Florida. I was born in Florida, so I'm a Florida cracker, born and bred. And I saw some of the things that were happening in our city, and I just figured, I've been a business owner and I've owned my own corporation. I have worked in social services. So I've worked in the judicial system. I've also worked in social services and I've seen how that connects. So, and it actually is like a vicious circle, you know, and knowing what could I do to take the path of speaking up and making a change. Instead of sitting on my couch and saying, "Oh my God, they're doing all of this," I needed to do something. So, from a local level, the impact that I can make from a local level would be as mayor. So that's what made me decide to run for mayor. I just saw the need, and someone needed to step up, and and I took it upon myself to do so.
Yeah. What would can you talk a little bit about the historical significance of your race, like what it would mean for you to be elected as the mayor of Fort Myers?
Well, I didn't think it would be, at the time, it would be that big of a deal. How somehow it has morphed into this huge deal because, I just thought that I needed to do something. However, a woman has never been elected, has not been elected since 1948. And even at that time, she was pretty much voted back out of the office by recount of all men. So that in and of itself is historical. But I would also be the first Black mayor of the city of Fort Myers, but also first Black female mayor of the city of Fort Myers. And this just so happens to be the 100th year of women's suffrage. So I think it was just really apropos that it all happened and things are just falling into place. My entire campaign has been a little bit serendipity. Things are just falling into place and it's just working very, very well.
Yeah. I think when I think of things like at least if I was running a campaign and good things happening, something that would definitely excite me would be getting an endorsement from somebody like Andrew Yang, who has a national profile and can bring a lot of energy and enthusiasm around candidates and their campaigns. I'm curious, like, how did you first get in contact with Andrew? Was it your team reached out to his team reached out to you?
A little bit of both. I know Matt had known, he had worked with him, and we would sit and have conversations about some of the policies of Andrews. And I told him, I said, I wanted to read more about him because of the fact that, when I heard about him, first, even recognized him was on stage in the presidential debate. But then the more I read about him, and then it was so strange that Matt just happened to have worked with him as well. So he knew a lot more information that he gave me firsthand, and we would sit and we would talk about it. He would pull up information on the computer. We would talk about it, and it's just filling my spirit with all of this information of what his policies and the changes that his policies can actually do for the working people, the people that are truly, truly struggling like they are here and all over the United States.
Yeah, definitely. So far, Washington Heights likes what he hears. He says, let's get Jacquelyn into office.
All right, Washington.
You mentioned Matt. He's your campaign manager, correct?
No, he's just a consultant.
Or just a consultant.
He's a consultant. Well, not just a consultant.
Yeah. So for those watching who weren't sure, Matt is a former staffer. Another Matt, because my name is also Matt, so it might get confusing. Matt's a staffer who used to work on Andrew Yang's campaign, and he's actually, I think, somebody that you've. I don't know actually how you two met, but it seems like when he first met you, he felt that maybe felt that there was like a connection there, and felt that you were somebody who really, I think, maybe embodied the spirit or the type of candidate that, maybe like the Yang Gang, us crazy people would be interested in supporting. How did I guess, do you see yourself as like a Yang Gang or like I don't know.
I want to actually just, if he was water, I could just dive in there, and just absorb all of his thoughts and his ideas. And he's so progressive his policies and his way of thinking is so progressive that it is amazing, and to see those changes and how that could work for the United States and even all over the world, it's just amazing. But yes, I'm part of that Yang gang. I'm not the leader yet, but I'm pushing to be that leader.
That's
At
what we
least
like to
here in
hear.
Fort Myers.
That's what we like to hear. I'm curious, besides like universal basic income, what are like some of the other policies that you're really passionate about?
Oh, well, the universal basic income, the our police reform. We've had some situations down here within our city, and of course, all over the U.S. with ensuring that not only the police are handling things properly, but the people feel safe with law enforcement. Our environment. That's another thing. We live in Florida. We're surrounded by beaches and beautiful beaches here. And it's our responsibility to take care of them. Our rights, there should be a rights of nature, and our nature, our estuaries, our ecosystem, our rivers and lakes, they deserve rights to be protected, and we have to protect it because we depend a lot on tourism, and the last thing we need is the blue algae, the fish situation, washing up on shore. We depend on that, and we do not want to have anything to interfere with that, but it's just too beautiful not to take care of.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned the protests that have been happening all across the country, and just a lot of terrible events we've seen with what happened with George Floyd and Jacob Blake, Breonna Taylor, and then there was another event last night in Philadelphia. Uh, another black man was shot and killed by police, and it's just a really terrible tragedy. And the chaos, the civil unrest that ensues, it's very it gets politicized, and it gets it's out for me from my perspective as somebody just watching at home. It seems like it would be a very difficult situation to try to navigate through, like knowing that if you're a mayor of a town and you're focused on your community, and then suddenly you have the national spotlight and the president tweeting about you or who knows what. How would you handle that situation as mayor if something tragic, something terrible happened in your city and it became maybe the focus of the national spotlight?
I think transparency is going to be key, and holding whomever may be at fault accountable for it. The communities no longer believe in accountability, that their leaders are holding those who they put their trust in accountable, as well as they feel like that there's no transparency, that there's these hidden agendas and everything. And I think that that's going to be the main key. And one of the things where it comes back to the universal basic income is that you're finding more and more people are they're stressing out. Their basic needs are not being met. Their ability to pay their bills, to be able to provide food on the table, to take care of their kids, it's affecting their sleep. So those basic needs, even their security. So if those basic needs are not being met, you have a higher level of stress, which causes a lot of and that cortisone, that stress cortisone, it raises that level of the stress. And this is what happens, like we saw last night. It causes a lot of mental health crises. So now at this point, we're having law enforcement to handle something like that when they're not really prepared to do. They're not trained in handling, situations like that. So if we could at least have that guaranteed income, it will address those basic needs. The stress levels go down, and therefore, we can have less of issues and incidents like we saw last night.
Yeah, I definitely think people tend to underestimate the effect of financial insecurity and how much it can contribute to, or at least exacerbate, just social unrest and chaos and sometimes violence that nobody really likes to see. Are there any changes that you would make to the police force in Fort Myers when you got into office? Are there any changes that you would try to make?
Oh, definitely. There has been an independent report by the Free Report, and they developed a report for that basically did a SWOT analysis for our city police. So they gave a list of changes that needed to be made, and a SWOT analysis is developing and understanding their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, and their threats. And based on that, they returned information within that report that needed to be addressed. There's a long history of corruption within the department that they found. And one of the first things that we would have to do is establishing a fair policing and basically providing the funding for law enforcement. A lot of people are talking about defunding the police department. That's not what we're doing. We need law enforcement, but proper funding and ensuring that the funding that we provide also gives accurate reporting of all of the incidents that are happening. We can gather data with regards to demographics, what's happening, law enforcement when they do any types of arrests. Also, it provides where we will have training for implicit bias. So understanding what implicit bias is, can they recognize implicit bias as well? So once we gather all of that information, the accurate accounting of information, as well as ensuring that there's no implicit bias, now we have results. We're going to get those results and apply it to the police department. So this is a roundabout way of focusing on exactly what we need, that fair policing, to attain specifically where we can have trust again within the police department. And it will also automatically provide for community policing. So this is just a way where, exactly what we need here within the city of Fort Myers to bring back that integrity, to bring back trust, and to provide safety for the citizens in Fort Myers.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you explain that, because I'm going to speak definitely this is my personal opinions on this topic. But when I first heard the slogan like defund the police, I definitely understand the urge to not spend money on things like military gear and stuff that shouldn't really be in police departments. And there's the other topic of the qualified immunity and the payouts that police departments make. But when I always heard this defund the police, the one thing I always thought is in theory, to train officers better, wouldn't we need to increase the funding for that? And they're just to me, I just felt like it would never made sense to pick a blanket position. Is that kind of the same way you approach it, or?
Exactly. Actually, at this point, our police department takes up about 41% of our budget within the city police department. And that's an extreme amount of funding. So basically, right now, we have a lot of military funding, militarized equipment. We don't need that. We are not in the middle of a war within the city. So just going back and looking at the data, going in and analyzing the information and also the budget itself to determine where we can really cut the budget, but also provide that in different places, like specialized training, especially right now, because I'm trained in social services, and there's something we call trauma-informed care, or the trauma-informed approach. So teaching law enforcement how to address each ethnicity and race in a trauma-informed manner. So that's basically putting yourself in their shoes, kind of understanding where these people that you're meeting, these different ethnicities and races, and also being able to talk to them on their level. And that basically really is what it's all about, providing that the proper training, and is not necessarily military.
Yeah. We have lots more questions to get to. I want to get to this one from Jonathan. He asks, have you been in touch with the other mayors for AGI, is technically what the group's called? And whether the answer is yes or no, have you thought about in terms of how exactly the pilot program would be funded, and also how you would decide who would qualify for the program for the trial?
Well, one of the things that we're doing is, when I spoke to Andrew, I had a chance to speak to him, and he had to really. I was so excited about even being involved in it because I'm totally sold on it. You know, he said, "Well, wait a minute, you have to win the race first." So I went on and I signed up for news, news reports and in any kind of information, so I would get be automatically informed. And so, from what he told me, I can, once I do win the race, one of the first phone calls is actually getting with him, getting with his team, so we can, we'll be able to set that up. I don't want to have to recreate the wheel. They've actually
Yeah.
done this in other cities, Mississippi, Atlanta, so I want to utilize that knowledge and get it to fit for the city of Fort Myers. I think one of the issues that so many cities do and around the country, we go in and everyone has the platform there. So we go in and try to recreate the wheel. We really don't have to do that. It's all right there for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's funny the way you describe that. I am Here's another question. What's kind of the current situation with the current mayor in Fort Myers? Because I'm be honest, I have no clue who the current mayor of Fort Myers is. Are you running against an incumbent there, or is it a open race where the current mayor is retiring?
The current mayor actually ran for Congress. His name is Henderson, Randy Henderson. He ran for Congress, and and because of his run for Congress, he had to resign his seat for mayor. So currently, my opponent is a person that sat on city council. He's been there for a couple of years. He's been in all about development. Our city is actually divided, literally. The city of Fort Myers is one of the most segregated cities, recognized nationally as one of the most segregated cities south of the Mason-Dixon line. So this is a process it's the same good old boy town. Everyone knows everyone, and the rich are getting richer, and there's no middle income hardly anymore. It's just the others. So I've lived actually on both sides of the town, both sides of the city, and lived in a gated community, raised my children there, but also grew up in an area where, it was predominantly Black and brown. And, my family, my parents still live there. I've moved back there to help my parents. So I've seen both sides of the city. My opponent only has seen one, and that's from a law enforcement perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to know, like, usually when I think of Fort Myers, Florida, is people tend to think of it as like a red area. How are you kind of feeling going in? What are we now? Is it just a week now before the
Yes,
election? 1 week away? How are
6
you kind of,
days.
yeah, 6 days. Wow. How are you feeling being 6 days out, knowing that, this is an area, at least the broader county, I'm not sure about the city itself, that does traditionally vote for Republicans?
hmm Well, that's the thing. The city of Fort Myers is a minority majority. So it technically is more Democrats than it is Republicans, more blue. So when we think about the county in and of itself as a whole, it leans more red than blue. So the city itself, that small little area right there in the middle, it leans more blue. So it works in my favor.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question from Osen66. How do you feel about the Florida amendment on open primaries?
Ah, open primaries. Um, it's going to happen. They're really doing it anyway. But it's happening. There's nothing really at this point that we can do about it, other than vote, you know, and use
Yeah.
your voice.
Yeah. Here's another question, kind of going back to the topic of police departments in American cities. One thing that I think that gets kind of, I don't know, maybe law. I don't know if saying that it gets lost is the right word, or and I don't even know if it's getting overlooked is the right word either. But just talking about the fact that the people that, for all the talk about how, police officers and police in America perhaps uh, aren't living up to their potential, and there needs to be a lot of reform. Um, the police department and the officers and the unions and everything that goes on, they're still people, and they're also very influential and have a lot of power. And it's important for a governor, or sorry, not a governor, a mayor, to be able to work with those groups and, get along and build a coalition. How would what would your strategy be to try to be able to build that coalition and work with people that, maybe in some cities, the mayor and the chief police can't stand each other? How would you try to make sure that that's a good working relationship?
Well, I think with what I'm decently good at bringing people together. I've had to do that owning my own corporation, working with governmental entities as well as in the private industry. And I have a huge amount of respect for law enforcement. In my position as a child protective investigator in social services, we work together all the time. And not only that, my son is actually he's on track for law enforcement as well. So not only have I worked with them, I have family members that are in law enforcement. So I understand. I have fear every time that I couldn't imagine, once my son finishes and he goes out, I want him to come home safely. They have to be very careful, and there's a lot of responsibility that is also on their shoulders. So my job is to make sure that they understand that I empathize with the position that they are in. But also, as a mayor, there's certain expectations that I have from them because they took an oath of office. So I hold them higher, with a higher expectation than I hold anyone, because of that oath. And that oath is to serve and protect, in an unbiased manner, impartially, and that they're going to tell the truth, that they're going to be truthful, but also I'm going to protect them where I can put forth some policies where they will feel comfortable to change the culture of law enforcement, that they're comfortable with coming to their superiors when they see wrongdoing by their coworkers.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to make it where they're comfortable as well, and also standing up for them when they do right, but also holding them responsible when they make bad decisions. Because wherever we do, and no matter who we are, we have to be responsible for the decisions that we make.
Yeah, definitely. We have another audience question. It's from Tom. He wants to know, how do you feel about the topic of gentrification?
Oh wow. This is something very dear to my heart. We had several years ago, we had an entire area, about 4 blocks, that was decided that the city decided that they were going to build a baseball stadium for the Red Sox. And they ended up forcing everyone out of their homes. And these were people that had lived there for years. They had paid off their homes. The homes could have been around $80,000 or so, somewhere around there. But the fact of the matter is, most of these people had lived there for years. They had paid it off. They had invested in their homes. And now, you know, we have this city that comes in and says, well, we want to build a stadium. Okay. So all of these people were moved out. And, of course, when you have to buy another home or anything, there's no way you're going to be able to afford it based on what what the city decides to pay you for your existing home. That stadium was thriving for about 4 years, and Red Sox moved to another stadium. And now the stadium is just sitting there and not being used. And that is just unbelievable. And it is sad. It disrupts people's lives, and we can do better as a city, but as a nation than that. People need to be treated better than that.
Yeah,
And this universal basic income can help prevent that from happening as well.
definitely. Kind of staying on the topic of housing, you mentioned earlier about how Fort Myers is, which you mentioned not many people know this, and I didn't until just a few minutes ago. You mentioned how it's one of the most segregated cities in the country. What is your plan to try to? What is your plan to try to, I guess, try to desegregate and try to bring more, like more of a mix of culture and just diversity within the city?
I think, when we're looking at this city as a whole, we need to be able to give people opportunities. Opportunities brings hope. And if they are able, with this universal basic income, I believe that it will make people where they want to have more. When you know that you can have more, now your stress level is down. You have hope now, and now you're not stressing. You're not dealing with depression. So therefore, you want to do better, and it gives you that drive to do better. And again, that's why I always go back to this universal basic income, because I think it's like a godsend.
It
I was
sound,
speaking. I was speaking actually to a couple of young ladies that were living in the projects, and they have struggled. It took them 3 years, but during that period of time, they are single moms. They lived in one of the oldest projects in Fort Myers, but they went to school. One of them received their nursing. She's a registered nurse now, and she was actually purchasing her home. So just imagine this: if we did have this UBI, it would have probably taken her less than a year to do this, where it actually took her 3 years. They have the drive that gives them hope. So therefore, they want to do better. Now we're having them move out, and they're moving into other areas. Instead of just being in one area, they're moving in other areas, basically the same way I did.
yeah. When I was going to ask, are there any current mayors or past mayors, or if we even want to go beyond mayors, just anybody in politics that at any point in your life that you kind of looked up to, or perhaps, you know, thought was someone was very wise and was doing a great job and thought that they were somebody you could learn from?
Oh, wow. I can tell you that right now. It is, her name is Veronica Shoemaker. She was one of the first business owners here in the city of Fort Myers. She owned a flower shop. And every Friday growing up, my dad would go to the flower shop and he would buy my mom roses. So he would either get a dozen of roses or 2 dozen. So the 2 dozen, I knew he had pissed my mom off. So he really needed to make up for a lot. So, but I remember seeing her, and she sat on city council. It took her 17 times. She ran for city council 17 times before she actually won the seat. And she looks at me while when my dad is paying for the roses, and she says, "Young lady," she's like, "either you stand for something or you will fall for anything. You hear me?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And that has always, always, always stuck with me. And even then, I didn't realize how it impacted my life. It was always there in my brain. But, and I look back on my life on standing up for kids that were being bullied when I was in middle school, or, being on, being active in high school, in leadership in high school. And I realized thinking back how much of an impact she was on my life. And she was incredible. 17
Hmm.
times she ran.
Yeah, that's persistence. If
Yes,
there was persistence.
yes.
Uh, we have a question from RM Valerdo. I think this is a good question. She asked, do you think the minimum wage should be increased to $15 an hour? And kind of just following up on that, how do you just view the general question of, when people talk about raising the minimum wage versus something like a universal basic income? Do you see it as like we need a combination of the two, or we should focus on one or the other first, or what is your view of that?
Well, I think even now, the minimum wages. No, I definitely support minimum wage being increased. Um, my goodness, if we could afford it, I would do it at $20 an hour, because when you think about it, $15 an hour is still really below the poverty line, or at the poverty line. So here, just a one-bedroom apartment is close to $1,500 a month. Between $1,200 and $1,500 a month. Someone making $15 an hour cannot afford that, and especially with the fact that our cost of living is pretty stagnant, and our rent it increases by 7 to 8, between 7 and 10% every year. So what I'm doing is, Mira, and what I would like to do and implement is, to freezing that at least to 2 to 3% increase per year, rather than that 7 to 10. We want to give people an opportunity to live, not just survive. And if you've ever seen people surviving, as I have, it will change your life.
Yeah.
I've seen people sleeping on the floors, and on just mattresses, and they're doing that just to try to keep a roof over their head, because they can't buy a bed. So, many of our leaders need to experience that, not just go out for a couple of days and volunteer, but actually work in a system where you can see people how they make lemonade out of lemons, and
Yeah.
they continue to smile, and they work 2 and 3 jobs, but they continue to smile.
Yeah. So I guess you'd say it's kind of something where you think we need both, uh if maybe not a $15 minimum hour, $15 per hour minimum wage right now, definitely increase it, and also do the universal basic income.
Yes. I mean, the $15 an hour is going to be in increments anyway. It's not
Yeah.
like, automatically you're going to make $15 an hour. And that's going to have to go and grow according to the businesses. And a lot of that is going to depend on COVID and how we address COVID across the United States. Because if the numbers increase as they are in Fort Myers and in Florida, the small businesses specifically are going to be severely affected. So if people aren't spending money in the businesses, they cannot afford to be able to pay people at that amount of money per
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I think like a universal basic income would just do so much, because like you have with, at least with Andrew Yang's plan, he had the $1 trillion tech companies that were going to mostly be paying for it. And so
Yes.
and then the money would have been put into the pockets of the consumers, then the consumers would have been putting it into the small businesses who aren't having to pay for the, as much of the UBI as the Amazons of the world, which is just why I loved it so
Yeah,
much.
I
I
know. And it's a perfect circle. That's that perfect, for lack of a better word, storm, because it actually is going to feed off of each other. People are going to spend money. They're going to be happy. They're going to feel comfortable, and that their foundation of their lives is better, so they're
Mhm.
more solid. So they're going to want to spend money. So they're going to spend that money to the businesses. The businesses are able to hire more people because you have more business coming in. So it's just the perfect storm.
Yeah. Here's a really good question from Daniel. He wants to know about the Shelby versus Holder decision and the fact that ever since then there's been a significant assault on I guess voting rights, especially on minority communities. And he says that Florida has been a major offender. As mayor, do you have any recourse to protect our sacred voting rights given threats posed by the governor and state house?
Definitely. We are going to work with the county commission as well as our state representatives to ensure that the voting rights are protected. This is a constitutional right, and these rights are they're sacred. This isn't like it's something that where it's like, okay, you can do this. This is something. This is a a right that we have, and it's just like women's rights. And so many things right now. That's why it's so important for people to get out there and vote, because a lot of things are going to be affected, especially by our recent, Supreme Court justice choice. So voting is going to be so crucial to ensuring that our rights, our overall rights, are going to be protected.
Definitely. I gotta admit, I personally really like what I'm hearing so far, and I was pretty much already on board the moment I heard UBI pilot.
Oh
so,
yes.
so I think I'm even more on board now. Anybody who's watching who also likes what they're hearing, how can they get involved at this point? Just being the fact that we are 7 days away. Are you still looking for people to donate or volunteer?
Absolutely. Donating, the last date to donate is Friday at noon, this coming Friday at noon. So definitely we're looking for donations, contributions. They're actually, believe it or not, my opponent, or I don't know, some of their followers or whatever, they are actually destroying my signs as fast as I put them up there. And
Yeah.
there's been a lot of
Fine.
negative things that have been happening. And I thought, who would have thought? I'm just a woman just running,
Yeah.
trying to make a difference.
Politics is so dirty, and because
Oh
I see
wow.
it, like I've been, trying to help out as much as I can, just because I'm so passionate about UBI, and I'm a big fan of Andrew myself. So anybody he endorses, I want to help with, and just seeing the number of campaigns that have had to deal with just terrible stuff going on. One guy in Virginia, he had his signs not only taken down, but they were like shot up, like 40
Yes.
bullet holes in his sign. Just
Oh yeah. This is a hunting state
crazy
as well.
stuff.
Yeah, it is
But
crazy. I was really shocked. I had my tires have been, I replaced two tires now, and it just tells me I'm doing something right,
yeah,
you know, and they're a little bit kind of in a conundrum, or not quite, they're off kilter. Maybe I threw them a little bit off kilter a little bit, but that's a good thing,
yeah,
but yes, go to my website at www.mcmillerformayor.com. We are seeking phone bankers, texters, all of those technology. If you're into technology, we're looking for people to do that. If they are, we're looking for people to knock on doors, however, safely, because I am definitely for the mask and making sure that we are protecting ourselves and protecting others. But I want everyone to be a part of this. This is not only, have I realized it's so historic because I'm the first Black woman to make it past the primaries, but just to be here and be doing what I love, and I have this huge passion for, and knowing that Andrew is willing to support me, and I'm thinking, I don't care wherever I may land from this, balloon that I'm on, this high that I'm on, I'm still going to push for it because it's something that is absolutely needed. These families are working so hard, and I see them, and it will make such a huge difference in the people's lives that it touches. So yes, I want to see it universal, but let's do it in Fort Myers.
yeah. Daniel says just donated, and he's curious. He wants to know, can you use help from folks out of state? He's aware that in local races, it can cut either way.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah. Yeah, we have some people. We actually have a young lady from Hong Kong that is volunteering. She does a lot of our media. I have a lady from a young woman from California, from New York. They're doing some of the social media. We need people on social media because I have these trolls that are right like crazy on my back.
Oh,
Oh
is it
yeah.
on Twitter?
Oh, everywhere,
Everywhere?
especially on Facebook.
Facebook. I know
Yes.
Yang Gang's good at Twitter, but I don't know how we are at Facebook.
Hey, they're on
Because
Twitter as well.
you said it. You're in the club now. You're in our exclusive club. No, I'm just kidding. Anybody could be Yang Gang, but I
I
want
am
to.
so young gang.
Yeah, I you can tell because basically people would laugh, not laugh. I don't want to say, but sometimes people would feel like Andrew was overdoing it when he would bring up UBI like every other sentence, back during the campaign. But it really does affect everything.
It
And
does.
when people go down the rabbit hole, they start seeing that, and you can't get that out of your head of seeing like how transformative that this single idea can be. I want
Mhm.
to I want to get to a few more questions before we wrap this up here. 'Cause we've had a great conversation so far. A few more questions from Daniel. Uh, or actually, this question is from Justin. He wants to know if it's possible to amend local. This is kind of a complicated question. To amend local constitutions to codify someone's bodily liberty and by extension reproductive rights. I guess with the Supreme Court now switching to a 6-3 conservative majority and the fact that Roe v. Wade could be at risk, people are going to be looking for what can people at the local and at the state level do to try to protect Roe v. Wade. Is that like something that you've thought about and have a plan for?
Well, everything is built from the Constitution, and then we have the federal laws. The local laws cannot overturn or decide. Well, we're not going to follow the federal laws. However, there are ways legally that we could do it. Not necessarily say that we're not going to follow the law in and of itself. However, there are some policies. We don't have constitutional laws, but we have policies that we can set forth
Mm-hmm.
and within the municipalities. So that's something I would definitely look at. But at this point, if they overturn Roe v. Wade, um, is going to that's the reason why they had to make the law in and of itself, and across the board. So we can, that's something that we could look into, but it's definitely not something that we can just ignore and just say we're not going to follow federal law because
Yeah.
we could be fined by the state.
Yeah. This question is from Daniel. He wants to know more about the issue with just voting rights and how certain people want to make it really hard for whatever reason. Well, I guess we know the reasons, but people want to
Yes.
make it really hard to vote. What are some of the things that just you could do at the mayoral level to try to push back on that? Like if there were voter purges or issues with registration or just even disadvantages in terms of, positioning of precincts or moving them out of certain communities.
Well, yeah, that would definitely be something that we can look at. We can work with the city and the county because we're located right smack and dab in the middle of the county. So we would work with the county commissioners as well as with city council and come up with a plan to address that. We also have I have worked closely with Desmond Meade, who is the head of the FRRC and for returning citizens and getting their rights restored. Years ago, we had the poll tax to prevent African Americans or people of color from voting. Then they had to prevent them from voting, you had to take a test at one point. That was years ago, as soon as they passed the law where we could vote. So they've always had these barriers that we've had to cross. And during the current environment, they're still trying to, Florida, for one, we voted for Amendment 4. So now they turned around and they sued, they appealed it, and our governor has it where now we would have to pay that off. So now that we're paying it off, they're fighting that. So they're either going to accept the money, they made the rule themselves, now we're paying it off, with Desmond Meade and his group. They're helping to pay it off with a lot of players, NFL players, a lot of philanthropists that are donating money to be able to pay that off. So they're looking at every way, but we do have a lot of attorneys that are working on addressing voter suppression. People can actually go to the website for voter protection and actually, let them know if there's been any issues or anything like that to make sure your vote counts. But we have to be on top of that from a city aspect as well as a county, as well as a state aspect as well.
Yeah. I have one final question that just popped into my head before we wrap this up. With Florida being a state that I'm pretty sure, because I don't live in Florida, I'm pretty sure that marijuana is a state where, or Florida is a state where marijuana is, I know it's not legal, but I also don't think it's been decriminalized, where a lot of states have at least decriminalized marijuana.
It.
Would you consider decriminalizing marijuana at the city level? Because I know that's something that some cities have done. I'm not sure how it...
Absolutely. It just makes sense. It is something, that is being legalized. Eventually, it's going to be legalized as well. But the decriminalization of marijuana is definitely one of my, something that I would want to do. It just doesn't make sense that we are using that as a way to, arrest people. These are misdemeanor crimes that leads into felony situations, unfortunately, and it's ruining young people's lives. So it's definitely something I would be 100% for. It just makes sense, and I like the sensibility of things.
Yeah.
God makes things simple. We just complicate it, and I don't like complicating anything.
Yeah, people do tend to make things way more complicated than they need to be, especially in government. But hopefully, we can have a chance to change that, starting with Fort Myers and a lot of other places across the country in just 1 week. Jacquelyn, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show. What is your website one more time? I have it linked down in the description, but for those who don't feel like scrolling to click.
It is www.mcmiller, MCMILLER, for mayor.com. You'll see me there. Say hello. I want to see everyone on there. I had such a ball and I couldn't wait to see you. I've looked at a lot of your YouTube, and it's just great that you're doing this and hanging with Yang for sure.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you for coming on and talking about your campaign. We wish you the best of luck next Tuesday. Going to be rooting you on from afar. And just again, anybody watching, I'm sure you have phone banking and text banking or some sort of volunteer operation going. Get out the vote effort, sign up, get going, consider donating if you can, and let's make history.
Make history, 3rd. Have fun, and enjoy this, and let's get the UBI here in Fort Myers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jackie.